The sound that broke the silence would change everything. Margaret Hayes stood at her kitchen window, watching the November rain streak down the glass. The clock on the wall showed 11:30. Outside, the streetlights cast yellow pools on the wet pavement, and the wind rattled the bare branches of the oak tree in their front yard. "Come to bed," Maggie called Frank from the hallway. Her husband of 43 years appeared in the doorway, his grey hair still damp from his evening shower. "You've been standing there for 20 minutes. "I know," Margaret said softly. She wrapped her cardigan tighter around her shoulders. I can't shake this feeling." Frank walked over and placed a gentle hand on her back. "What feeling?" "That something's coming," she whispered. "Something that needs us." Frank smiled, the kind of patient smile he'd perfected over their decades together. "You and your intuitions. Come on now. Tomorrow's a big day. We're finally cleaning out Danny's old room, remember?" At the mention of their son's name, Margaret's throat tightened. Danny had been gone for 15 years, now not dead, but distant. He'd moved to California, started a new life, and their phone calls had dwindled to birthday wishes and rushed holiday greetings. His old room remained frozen in time, a museum of baseball trophies and high school yearbooks that they could never quite bring themselves to pack away. "I remember," Margaret said quietly. They were halfway up the stairs when the knock came. It wasn't loud or aggressive, just 3 soft raps on the front door. Tap, 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 tap. Margaret and Frank froze, looking at each other with wide eyes. The clock in the living room chimed midnight. "Who on earth?" Frank started. Another 3 knocks. Equally gentle. Frank descended the stairs slowly, flicking on the porch light. Margaret followed close behind, her heart suddenly racing. Through the frosted glass panel beside the door, they could make out a dark shape, someone standing very still. Frank opened the door just a crack, keeping the chain latched. A young man stood on their porch, soaked to the bone. He couldn't have been more than 19 or 20. His dark hair was plastered to his forehead, and his thin jacket, far too light for November, dripped steadily onto the welcome mat. But it was his eyes that struck Margaret most. They were re-rimmed and exhausted, holding a depth of weariness that no one so young should carry. "I'm sorry," the young man said, his voice shaking, whether from cold or emotion, Margaret couldn't tell. "I know it's late. I didn't know where else to go." Frank's posture remained rigid, protective. "Son, it's midnight. What do you need?" The young man looked down at his feet. "I saw your light on. I've been walking for hours and I just... His voice cracked. "I just need to make a phone call, please. My phone died, and I need to call my mom. I need to tell her I'm sorry." Something in his voice, the raw desperation, the genuine pain, made Margaret's hand reach out and touch Frank's arm. "Frank," she said softly. "Let him in." Frank looked at her, searching her face. After 43 years, words weren't always necessary. He saw what she saw, not a threat, but a lost boy who reminded them both of someone they'd been missing for far too long. Frank unlatched the chain. The young man stood in their entryway, creating a small puddle on the hardwood floor. Up close, Margaret could see he was shivering violently. "What's your name?" she asked gently. "Elias," he said. "Elias Morrison." "Well, Elias Morrison," Margaret said, moving into action the way she always did when someone needed mothering. "Before you make any phone calls, you're going to change into something dry, or you'll catch pneumonia." 20 minutes later, Elias sat at their kitchen table wearing an old tracksuit that had belonged to Danny. It fit him almost perfectly. He held a mug of hot cocoa between his palms, and some color had returned to his cheeks. "The phone's right there," Frank said, pointing to the landline on the wall. "Take your time." Elias stared at the phone as if it were a mountain he needed to climb. "I don't know if she'll answer," he said quietly. "I said some terrible things before I left. Told her I never wanted to see her again. That was 3 months ago." Margaret sat down across from him. "What happened, honey?" Elias was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, the story spilled out. He'd been angry at his mother for years, angry that his father had left, angry that they never had enough money, angry at all the sacrifices she'd made that somehow made him feel guilty just for existing. 2 weeks after his 19th birthday, they'd had a fight about college. She'd wanted him to stay local. He'd wanted to move across the state. Words had turned sharp and cruel. "I told her she was holding me back," Elias said, his voice barely a whisper. "I told her she was the reason I couldn't be happy. And then I left. I moved in with friends, got a job at a warehouse." He looked up at them with tears in his eyes. "But tonight, my buddy told me his mom had been diagnosed with cancer, and all I could think about was, what if something happened to my mom? What if those were the last words I ever said to her?" Margaret felt her own eyes filling with tears. She thought of Danny, of all the times she'd reached for the phone and stopped herself, telling herself he was busy, that he had his own life now. Elias, Frank said, his voice rough with emotion, I can tell you from experience, the thing you'll regret most isn't the words you said. It's the words you didn't say, the calls you didn't make, the time you let slip away thinking there would always be more. Elias stood up on shaky legs and walked to the phone. With trembling fingers, he dialed a number he clearly knew by heart, but Margaret and Frank moved to give him privacy, but they could hear his voice from the living room. Mum, it's me. I know it's late. Mom, please don't cry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I love you. I should have said it every day. Can I come home, tomorrow? I'll catch the first bus. Mum, I just thank you. Thank you for answering. When Elias emerged from the kitchen 15 minutes later, his face was blotchy and tear-stained, but something had lifted from his shoulders. He looked younger somehow, and lighter. She answered, he said, almost in disbelief. She said she'd been waiting for me to call. She said she never stopped hoping. Margaret pulled him into a hug, this stranger who'd knocked on their door at midnight. Mothers never stop hoping, she whispered. They made up the couch for Elias that night. In the morning, Frank drove him to the bus station and bought his ticket home. As they watched the bus pull away, Margaret slipped her hand into Frank's. I'm going to call Danny today, she said. Frank squeezed her hand. I think that's a good idea. They drove home in comfortable silence. The rain had stopped, and pale sunlight was breaking through the clouds. When they walked through their front door, the house felt different, somehow warmer, fuller, as if the love that had poured out of it the night before had somehow seeped into the walls. That evening, Margaret dialed a number she knew by heart. Danny, hi honey, it's Mum, No, nothing's wrong. I wanted to hear your voice. Outside, the first stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky, and inside the Hayes home, the silence that had lived there for so long was finally broken by the sound of hope, of healing, and of a love that had never really gone away. It had simply been waiting for someone brave enough to knock.